But on Capitol Hill, freshman Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is in no mood to talk about any of it.
The president said that you should resign and the vice president said you should be held accountable for your views. Can you respond to that?
No, thank you.
Then asked about this Wednesday tweet where she said to Trump, "You have trafficked in hate your whole life against Jews, Muslims, indigenous, immigrants, black people, and more. I learned from people impacted by my words. When will you?" Omar took strong exception.
This morning you said the president trafficked.
What is wrong with you?
Question about your tweet. You had a tweet saying the president trafficked in hate.
Yes, I tweeted. There's a response. You can run that and have a nice day.
Why can't you explain more what you meant to say?
A Somali refugee who joined Michigan's Rashida Tlaib as the first Muslim woman to ever serve in the House, Omar has long criticized the Israeli government, but has said she respects the Jewish people. And her
is that anti-Semitism has no place in the United States Congress. And Congressman Omar is terrible what she said. And I think she should either resign from Congress or she should certainly resign from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. What she said is so deep-seated in her heart that her lame apology, and that's what it was lame, and she didn't mean a word of it, was just not appropriate. I think she should resign from Congress, frankly. But at a minimum, she shouldn't be on committees, certainly that committee. And with that, we're going to have a meeting. Our cabinet is doing really well, I tell you.
New cadre of Democrats, the fresh faces, so fresh, so face. And usually we talk in this context about Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. Don't worry, we'll get to her in just a second. But she is not the fresh face who was making waves over the weekend. Instead, the fresh face making waves over the weekend was blatant anti-Semite Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, who has indeed been an anti-Semite for years upon years upon years. And it's not like a big secret. You know, what's hilarious is that the same media that will suggest the entire Republican Party is anti-Semitic because Donald Trump was once close with some people who themselves were close with the alt-right. The same media that will suggest that the entire Republican Party by a wide swath is anti-Semitic because of Steve King, who, by the way, is actually pro-Israel. That same media will suggest that the Democratic Party has no problem with anti-Semitism at all. They're just asking the hard questions. They're just asking the hard questions. This is something that Dave Weigel of the Washington Post tweeted out about Ilhan Omar. So let's start from the beginning. Ilhan Omar's record. Okay, so Ilhan Omar back in 2012 tweeted that Israel was, quote unquote, hypnotizing the world. And then she spent years defending that tweet, suggesting there was nothing wrong with the tweet. And then in 2013, she gave an interview to a person who called Israel the Jewish ISIS and compared Hamas to Holocaust victims. That was in 2013. In that same interview, Omar compared the United States military to Al-Qaeda. The account AG Conservative has a good summary of all of this over at Twitter. At her inauguration, Omar celebrated with Linda Sarsour, who herself is a blatant and ridiculous anti-Semite. She has come out as a supporter of the anti-Semitic BDS movement, which is boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. Leaders of that movement have been tied to terrorist groups, as in this week. In late January, Omar argued that Israel cannot be considered a democracy because it is Jewish, which is insane, since Muslims have more rights in Israel than anywhere else in the Middle East. And by the way, there are plenty of democratic countries that have established state religions. And now she comes out and suggests that the reason that Republicans support Israel is because they're being paid off. So she tweeted a couple of things over the weekend. Here is what she tweeted. First, she tweeted, let me find the first tweet. The first tweet was in response to Glenn Greenwald, who himself is a rabid anti-Israel anti-Semite. He's a self-hating Jew. He wrote, GOP leader Kevin McCarthy threatens punishment for Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib over their criticisms of Israel. It's stunning how much time U.S. political leaders spend defending a foreign nation, even if it means attacking free speech rights of Americans. Nobody is attacking the free speech rights of Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. They're sitting in Congress. They're sitting in Congress. They have not had their free speech rights violated. And yet, there's Glenn Greenwald suggesting that all of these Republicans are doing something deeply wrong by mentioning Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, both of whom happen to be radical anti-Semites. So Ilhan Omar tweeted out, quote, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby," with a little music symbol. Now, as a Jew, One of the oft-used anti-Semitic tropes, I mean, this has been true for thousands of years, is that the Jews control the monetary systems with their shekels, that the Jews are an evil, nefarious force behind world events spreading around money, and that the reason that people support the Jews is because they've been corrupted by the Jew gold. It's been the Jew gold behind Republican support for the state of Israel, which, of course, is a complete lie. The vast majority of Americans support Israel and support Jews because they're not anti-Semitic and because they recognize that Israel is fighting against some of the worst people on planet Earth. And it isn't really a hard choice when you have a choice between democratic country that respects individual rights and evil Islamist dictatorship that tries to murder civilians in their bed, right? Not a hard choice for most Americans. Very hard choice for a lot of Democrats, apparently. Ilhan Omar, though, suggests that the reason Republicans support Israel is because they're being paid off by the Jew gold. So she tweets that out. It's all about the Benjamin's baby. And then somebody asked for clarification. That'd be Batya Ungar-Sargon. Now, I know Batya. Nice enough lady. She and I have had a couple of email exchanges. I've written a couple of columns for The Forward, where she's the editor. The Forward is a very, very left-wing Jewish magazine. They are more than happy to cover for anti-Semites, so long as those anti-Semites can put a thin veneer of social justice over their anti-Semitism. Batya has spent years trying to pretend that Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and AOC, or at least months, trying to pretend that these three are not, in fact, anti-Semites or in league with anti-Semites, and she bends over backwards to use moderate language in response to anti-Semitism from these three. So Batya tweeted out, quote, "Would love to know who Ilhan thinks is paying American politicians to be pro-Israel, though I think I can guess. Bad form, Congresswoman. That's the second anti-Semitic trope you've tweeted." Okay, which again is a pretty weak way of putting this. Bad form? Bad form. You think that Batya was saying bad form about Steve King? You think Batya was saying bad form about Donald Trump after Charlottesville? None of the folks on the left, it was funny. Their response was basically, well, I wish she wouldn't use that language. It wasn't, I wish she would stop being a rabid anti-Semite who hates Jews. It wasn't, maybe we shouldn't have elected somebody like this. It wasn't, maybe we should take her off the House Foreign Affairs Committee where Ilhan Omar currently sits. It wasn't that. It was, you know, it's really bad form that she sort of let the cat out of the bag with being a rabid anti-Semite and all. I wish she would sort of walk that back. So Ilhan Omar doubled down in response to Batya Ungar-Sargon, who again is extraordinarily left-wing. So Batya tweeted, "Would love to know who Ilhan Omar thinks is paying American politicians to be pro-Israel, though I think I can guess." And Ilhan Omar tweeted back, AIPAC. That would be the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Number one, AIPAC does not really make a lot of contributions to politicians. The amount that they've spent on lobbying on a yearly basis, something like $3.5 million, okay, that is nothing compared to the beer lobby, which spends $20 million a year. Second of all, J Street spends a nearly equivalent amount of money on left-wing politicians. The reason that AIPAC gives money, that they lobby, the reason that they lobby politicians is for a particular purpose. But if you think that their lobbying, number one, is restricted to people who are supremely pro-Israel, that is not true. They had Barack Obama speak at the AIPAC conference controversially. They had Joe Biden speak at the AIPAC conference controversially. The only person I'm aware who has not been able to speak at the AIPAC conference was Ron Paul. So they allow pretty much everybody to speak at the AIPAC conference. AIPAC does not own the United States Congress by dint of paying people. This is sort of a similar trope to the idea that people in America are pro-gun because the NRA is signing them checks. Except now it's the nefarious Jews spending their shekels, the shekel masters, spending their shekels trying to convince Republican Congress people. Now, I have to mention, one of the weird things about this particular notion is the idea that Congress people are able to be bought and paid for. If that were the case, wouldn't you think that AIPAC would just ratchet up its spending and buy a bunch of Democrats? Why is it that everybody who's always worried about campaign spending is those people are themselves immune to such corruption? I remember asking this about John McCain when John McCain was talking about campaign finance reform. Oh, there's too much money in politics. People are buying politicians. Weird, John McCain. You haven't been bought. So why is it that you think everybody around you has been bought, but you have not been bought? There are certain rare instances in which Congress people are actually corrupt and take money from particular lobbies to change their views. That's pretty rare. Most people who are picking up support are picking up support because they pre-held those views. Most people who are pro-Israel were pro-Israel long before they had ever heard of AIPAC. Well, all of this drew some fire even from some members of the Democratic caucus. Congressman Max Rose, who's a Jew from New York, he tweeted out, "When someone uses hateful and offensive tropes and words against people of any faith, I will not be silent. Congresswoman Omar's statements are deeply hurtful to Jews, including myself. Implying that Americans support Israel because of money alone is offensive enough. But to go a step further and retweet someone declaring their pain at her sentiment is simply unacceptable." What happened is that Ilhan Omar mistakenly retweeted somebody who said, she's obviously targeting the Jews. This is no different from her calling Jews hook-nosed. And she retweeted it, and then she unretweeted it after she realized what she had retweeted. So Max Rose says, at a time when anti-Semitic attacks are on the rise, our leaders should not be invoking hurtful stereotypes and caricatures of Jewish people to dismiss those who support Israel. In the Democratic Party and in the United States of America, we celebrate the diversity of our people and the gods we pray to as a strength. The Congresswoman's statements do not live up to that cherished ideal. Here's the reality. If you were calling, like I was, for a move toward a censorship motion against Steve King, for example, which a lot of people in the Democratic Party were calling for, how do you not have a censorship of a resolution of censure against Ilhan Omar for all of this? And the reason is because the Democratic Party deep down actually agrees with Ilhan Omar. The Democratic Party, unfortunately, has become a party that is replete with anti-Semitism and certainly with anti-Israel activity. I was there in 2012 when the idea of Jerusalem as Israel's capital was booed at their convention. AOC is having phone calls with open anti-Semite Jeremy Corbyn in Britain and then pretending she doesn't know what's going on. It's a bunch of nonsense. The willingness to consort with open Jew-hating in the Democratic Party is pretty obvious at this point. Nancy Pelosi so far has been pretty silent on this. Chelsea Clinton tweeted that she would reach out to Omar's office, and then Omar tweeted that she'd be happy to chat with Clinton. So here's what's hilarious. So Chelsea Clinton tweeted out that she'd be happy to talk with Ilhan Omar, and then she was hit by Bernie Sanders supporters with, "How dare you attack Ilhan Omar?" And Melissa Byrne, who's a Bernie Sandersite, she said, "Disappointed Chelsea Clinton is piling on Ilhan instead of reaching out to her. She is a new member of Congress and figuring out how to navigate calling out AIPAC, which is a terrible organization aligned with Bibi, and learning that a lot of folks will assume the worst." There's nothing to assume. Ilhan Omar has repeatedly invoked anti-Semitic tropes because she's an anti-Semite. At a certain point, when someone is in your face, not dog whistling, but screaming in your face they don't like Jews, are we just supposed to pretend that that this is all a figment of our imagination? Is that where we're supposed to go with this? So Chelsea Clinton responded, "Hi, Melissa. I will reach out to her tomorrow. I also think we have to call out anti-Semitic language and tropes on all sides, particularly in our elected officials and particularly now." And then Ilhan Omar tweeted back at Chelsea Clinton, "Chelsea, I would be happy to talk. We must call out smears from the GOP and their allies, and I believe we can do that without criticizing people for their faith. I look forward to building an inclusive movement for justice with you." And Chelsea Clinton then backed off and replied, "Hello, Congresswoman. Completely agree. I will reach out to your office tomorrow. Looking forward to connecting about this thread and more. Chelsea." Weird. I don't remember Republican leaders saying about Steve King, "I look forward to connecting with Steve King to get clarification on his comments." I don't remember them doing the same thing with Roy Moore. I don't remember Republicans really doing the same thing with pretty much anybody. Okay, and this is not to say Republicans are superior to Democrats in every way. This is to suggest that Democrats are perfectly willing to overlook anti-Semitism in their own party.